The purpose of this trial is going to be to demonstrate how to add data services from our ArcGIS server to the ArcGIS Online web maps and applications. There's going to be some tips and tricks that'll apply to adding data services to ArcGIS Online or Portal for ArcGIS. However, this is intended to focus mainly on users or folks that'll be doing a trial of Weather Decision Technologies, WDT's WeatherOps GIS data services. When you're on a trial of our data services, you will have access to this URL, which you'll have credentials for. This will be the interface that you'll see, and this is a listing of directories that is going to give you access to all the different data services that we have. Within each directory is going to be a list of data services. And then once we get to the list of data services, each data service could have multiple layers in it. For example, this storm attributes data service is going to have 4 or 5 different data services. If you want, you can copy the URL to a particular layer if that's the only part of the data service that you wanted to see in a web map or an application. However, typically people add the URL to the full data service rather than just to a particular layer within the data service. So first things first, we're going to navigate to the My Content section of ArcGIS Online and grab a new folder that I'm going to use for this demo. Demo folder already exists. I thought I deleted that. Let's do this. Let's just call it something else. So the demonstration folder. So this is where we're going to add our content. So the first thing that we have to do is go somewhere in our ArcGIS server listing of services and grab an endpoint that we want to add as a data service in ArcGIS Online. We have over 120 different data services, so there's a lot to navigate through. If you're on a trial, I'd be happy to point you in the direction of the particular data service that you're looking for, or if there's something that you are looking for, I can help you navigate to that particular data service to get the rest endpoints. You don't have to sort through all 120 different data services. For the purposes of this demo, we're going to grab the NA Radar Single Scan, which stands for the North America Radar Single Scan, or the latest radar data that we have available. That's one of the most popular data services that we have. Once we've selected the directory that we want to add this data service to, we just go to Add Item and select from the web. It's going to be an ArcGIS server web service, so that's selected by default. That radio button is, so we can just paste the URL in. You'll notice that it has an HTTPS as our service, or our server only accepts HTTPS requests now. Whenever you click outside of that field, you'll notice that it takes a minute. It pings the service and realizes that it has to have credentials to access it. So I'm going to go ahead and enter some temporary credentials, which if you were on a trial, we would give you a set of credentials that would have access to all the data services, so you could play with those and evaluate them, find out which ones would be the most valuable for you. The Store Credentials with Service Item radio button is not selected by default. However, I strongly encourage people to select that whenever you add a data service. It will make sharing the data service within your organization a whole lot easier. If you create a map or a web application, it's going to save the credentials with that URL so that the end user isn't prompted to enter the credentials for our services that you're getting from us. Makes it a whole lot easier. Not everybody has to know those credentials. So I'll scroll down a little bit. Maybe I don't like the title that was given to the data service by WDT, so I just want to call it US Radar, even though it also covers Canada. I'm going to do that just for giggles. I'm going to give it a tag, just demo. That'll make it really easy to find for the purposes of this demo. I'll show you how to search by tagged things later. But all the tags that you already see come with the data service. So we tag all the data services that we offer with things that hopefully would be useful if you're trying to search for the radar data service within your ArcGIS Online organization once you have it added. Excuse me, I'm going to go ahead and add the item now. When you do that, it's going to bring up a page for this particular item in my content. The first thing I always do is go to the select share settings to make sure that I share it within my organization. In your organization, it's going to have the name of your organization here. Ours is Weather Decision Technologies. You can also share it with any groups that you might want to share it with. However, we don't want you to share it with everyone publicly on ArcGIS Online because this is a service that we provide and you wouldn't be allowed to share it outside of your organization. Go ahead and select OK there. Once you have the share settings selected the way that you want, then we can navigate back to a map. So we'll just create a new web map. And what sometimes will happen is people will add a data service using the add data button. They'll do just like we did in my content and they'll say add layer from the web. They're gonna put in their URL right there, hit the add layer button, and it's gonna ask for the credentials. If you do this, you might know them right now, but if you share this map with somebody else later, they might not know them. So we don't recommend doing this. So I'll hit cancel there, and in just a second, it'll probably pop up and tell me that it can't connect to that data service because I didn't give it the credentials. So now if I go to the add data button, I'm gonna hit search for layers. The tag that I put on it was demo, so I'm gonna click that and it brings up that US radar layer. It was also at the top by default because it was the latest data service that I added. If I want, I can click the tile, get a whole bunch of metadata, a description, terms of use, anything else that might be included with that data service. But I can quickly just add it to the map by hitting the plus sign and then hitting the back button, and it's going to go ahead and add that to my map. Almost all of our data services, in fact, all of our data services are dynamic in the fact that they're going to update frequently, some on a minute or less than a minute cadence, and others may only update every 12 hours, twice a day. But if I were to just leave this web map open like this, the data would stay like this unless I were panning or zooming, which is constantly re-requesting the data. So if I wanted to just leave something on a operations dashboard on a wall that would just stay up to date, I have to make sure that I tell it to refresh the data at a certain cadence that I can set within the web map. To do that, I click this little triple dot more options button, go down to the refresh interval, mouse over it. I don't have to click the checkbox, but I can if I want. And then whenever I put a value in here for every 5 minutes, it automatically checks the box. Things like our radar data update every 5 minutes. A lot of that information is included in the description for each data service as to how frequently it updates. But the one thing that you might want to think about here, even though the data updates every 5 minutes, if I loaded it and I'm 4 minutes into the update cycle, there might be a little bit of latency. So I could go all the way down to a minute, but that's going to make a whole bunch of requests when there's no new data to provide. So typically for things like this, I recommend something like 3 minutes. Now that we have this data service added, it's going to stay up to date, and anytime I share it within the organization or with somebody else, either as a web map or an application, it's no longer going to ask them for credentials because I've already saved those when I added it to the My Content section of ArcGIS Online. One other thing that I want to cover, which I'm going to go ahead and remove this, so we start with a clean slate, is adding a time-enabled data service. This is something that often trips people up because, for instance, they they don't understand or they've never worked with a time-enabled data service in ArcGIS Online before. So just for instance, we're going to use the Europe radar loop. I'm going to go ahead and copy this URL to my clipboard, and I'm going to navigate back to my content section of ArcGIS Online. Works very much the same in Portal for ArcGIS Online. Every once in a while, somebody won't have a certain port opened up, so it won't allow access to third-party services, but most of the time, if I've run into that with a client, it's a quick fix from their IT group or their portal administrator. I'm going to stay in the demonstration folder. I'm going to go back to the add item from the web, paste in my URL. Again, I'm going to enter the credentials, and I'm going to make sure that I store them so that nobody else has to worry about it. I'm not going to change any names, but I am going to add the demo tag, make it easy to find. And once I get to the item page, before I forget, I'm going to change my share settings just so that nobody else runs into any problems later. And then I can go ahead and open the data service straight from here using the Open in Map Viewer link. It's going to go ahead and pull up the data service, and it's going to load it using a predefined geographic domain. But you'll notice it zoomed to the domain where the data should be, but we're not seeing anything. What happened, this is where most people get tripped up, if they get tripped up at all. It's because the data service needs to be, we need to enable time with that. In order to do it, all we have to do is click on the little triple dot, mouse over to the enable time animation, click that, and it's going to bring up a time slider by default at the bottom of the screen. The European data only updates every 15 minutes, so we have a running 1 hour of data, as we do with our Japanese radar, our Australian radar, but those update on a 6-minute interval. The US is on a 5, so they have more time steps than the European radar mosaic does. One thing you'll notice is that ArcGIS Online has a default for the time slider that defaults to a time period rather than an instant. If I were to stretch this all the way to the end of the time period, you'd notice that it actually displays all 4 or 5 time periods all at once. So it kind of looks like the data, the radar data, are smudged across the map. So what I typically recommend people do is drag that handle all the way back so you're just displaying an instant. Oftentimes you might want to go configure your time settings. You can go, if you only wanted to show 30 minutes, you could adjust the time there. Typically, I always move the playback speed to the fastest available, just so it looks a little bit more fluid when you animate it. Every time you adjust those time settings, it always makes your default time period to a time period rather than an instant. I'm going to drag that handle back. Now I can click play, and it'll animate through the last hour of radar data over Europe. So that's how you can add a time-enabled data service to a map to make sure that you're seeing the data. If we go through and we save the map with the time-enabled, every time you load that map or that application that uses that web map, it will then by default have the data service time-enabled whenever you open it, so you don't have to do that every time. That's kind of a quick tutorial on how to add data to my content that requires credentials, how to add it to a web map, how to make sure you set the refresh interval along with the share settings before you even add it to a web map, and then also a quick tutorial on using time-enabled data services so that you can actually see them within your web map or your web applications on ArcGIS Online or Portal. If you like access to a trial, it's very easy for us to set up access to our WeatherOps GIS data services We typically turn them on for 14 to 30 days that people can play with them. We give you access to all the data services that we have, and then if we need to limit it to a subset of data services that have the most value or work for whatever your industry or use case requires, we can do that. In addition, I'm always more than happy to hop on a Zoom meeting and do a screen share with somebody so that we can walk them through how to add data services to their mapping applications, save them in their content just like we've done here if needed. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me, mgaffner, M-G-A-F-F as in Frank, N-E-R at WDTINC.com, and I'd be happy to help. Thanks.